Hi, and welcome to the Fancy Comma YouTube. Today I'm joined by Santiago Gisler, an experienced science communicator, coach, and consultant with a PhD in molecular genetics from the Netherlands Cancer Institute in Amsterdam. Santiago helps science communicators enhance and propel their projects, communication skills, and careers. He also helps professionals outside science launch purposeful and self-realizing projects beyond 9 to 5. In parallel, he manages Ivory Embassy, a website and YouTube channel discussing interdisciplinary topics to promote scientific critical thinking and honest dialogues on healthy skepticism, independent thinking, open communication, transparency, conflicts of interest, biases, fallacies, and scientific trust. Welcome, Santiago.
Thanks, Sheeva. Nice to talk again.
So today we're going to talk about generative AI. Today we're talking about generative AI and what it's good at and what it's not so good at and how we've used generative AI. So I guess I'll start off by asking you, Santiago, how have you used generative AI and what do you think generative AI is good at?
I have used a lot of generative AI, and it has taken over a lot of my work, but not fully delegated. I've used it since basically since the launch of ChatGPT, and I've been trying to play around with it, and I've used it a lot in my work to proofread certain parts, to improve other parts, and also to have some type of idea bouncing back and forth with the generative AI, especially ChatGPT.
So, I mean, I guess I can talk about how I've used generative AI. I hadn't used generative AI until recently when my client asked me to use generative AI because I had all these questions for him. And so he was like, don't ask me, I don't have time. Just go to ask generative AI. So I asked generative AI and it was helpful in some ways. Like it was able to summarize like tons of web pages but I had no way of like fact checking it because I have no content experience. I mean, I had no real content knowledge of that topic, which is also about AI. So that was a challenge. And then I think it hallucinated a entire Google support URL.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the downsides with especially ChatGPT, is that it tends to hallucinate a lot, especially when you request references or you request details about certain articles. So specifically for science communicators, this is very important because we often think that we can write whatever prompt and it will give us 100% accurate information. And many times you have to double check it. So this is one of the risks with generative AI, and especially ChatGPT, because it's so generalized that it lacks a lot of the accuracy that you would expect from the beginning from an artificial intelligence tool. And that's why I usually say to my clients or whoever I'm trying to help with science communication is to use it cautiously. So I use it as a tool and not as a replacement to your writing or your thinking. So use it as a tool and use whatever flaws it has, use them to your advantage.
So what are some novel applications of AI that you have used?
I have to be honest, I try to limit myself to what I know, especially when it comes to AI. So I try to learn as much as possible from the few tools that I use. But I can tell you that except for ChatGPT, and now more and more I'm using as a supplement, I'm also using Copilot, which is Bing's version of the GPT. They have both the GPT-3 and GPT-4. And which is a little bit less hallucinating when it comes to references and sources. So you can, and it's constantly updating. So you can easily ask it about new articles about certain topics, and it will give you that. And so those two I use as a supplement. But apart from that, I've also dabbled a little bit with DALL-E, which is an image AI where you can create your own, or some people would claim plagiarized images. And now, since I'm creating YouTube content, my software happens to have AI in the sense, in the form of eye contact. So I've not used it very much, but let's say I need to create a quick video for somebody or a conversation, and I record it, but I've not prepared enough, so I had to read a little bit from my laptop. So the AI will basically create eye contact with the camera, which helps when you don't when you're not 100% prepared, or you don't have time to repeat the recording over and over again, and it will kind of give you the eye contact. And then it will also remove a bunch of filler words such as ums and a and this type of thing. So this is pretty useful for people who kind of have problem with this type of things. So in those sense, I've been using AI, not 100% writing, but also for video creation.
So I've kind of been using AI similarly. So I have used, I recently edited a book that was written about AI called Reimagined, and it was written by these product managers in like big tech. They really wanted to write this book, and it was called Reimagined. And it actually debuted at number one, but they were talking about their process, number one in many different, it was a blockbuster hit. But I would like to say thanks to my editing. But the way they wrote it was they actually used generative AI to like write the outline, and then they actually wrote the actual parts themselves. But they also used there's this software, it's called, what is it called? It's like image AI. It's very famous. I forget what it's called, but they basically got it to draw like all these stylized pictures of like Alan Turing, the famous computer scientist. The book was written by them, but I also edited it. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was the video AI. I used it once, and actually it didn't work for me because it was like it. I talked to Martina Effaini, which I will link the video here, but when I did the AI, or like I clicked AI on accident, it was like AIify this, like jazz it up with AI, and then it just had us nodding. It was like me nodding for, or it was like her nodding for like maybe a full minute. And I was just like, why is this isn't helping me? And I literally didn't know what to do. And it made the interview so much shorter, but I didn't know how to revert it. So I just edited it, and luckily it turned out okay. But um, I think it did change our face shape kind of. Did do like face modifications. And there's this new Microsoft tool. You can just upload an image and it'll just like generate a whole speech out of it. So it's like, what makes us human anymore in this kind of thing? Because and it's in I have no words for like its potential, but also it's the fact that it's gonna just be a disruptive force for so many realms. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I think it's fun that you have an AI that creates nodding. I don't know what it's dedicated to do, but maybe it is some kind of complacent AI where it creates some type of positive vibe by making the participant nod towards each other. I don't know, but the image, was it? Did you use the DALI? Was that the image creator, or that you mentioned before?
It's called
The
Midjourney.
Oh, that's the okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I've been yeah, I tried to use that, but I think it's behind a paywall now, and I never managed to start playing around with it. But yeah, I see a lot of risks with AI, of course, and some of them I've been writing a lot about it. I like the theory behind to think around the theory of AI and the philosophy around it, and how it will affect us, especially as content creators. I've since the beginning of ChatGPT, I've seen a lot of, I've experienced a lot of people, both my clients and by reading articles, who are extremely worried about AI and how that might replace a lot of work, and especially the type of work that we do, whether it is copywriting or article writing or whatever it can do. it's inevitable that it's going to take over quite a lot of things. But I think also it's a quite an I see an I'm pretty optimistic as well. I see that it can be an advantage to the ones who create original content. If you create original content, have original ideas, and don't follow the trends, you will thrive in this type of environment, because the more we use AI, the more of a monotonous environment, content environment we will get. The more, so think about it as basically that if you and I are using generative AI to create content, we will have a bunch of other people using it, and eventually what these large language models require is data, and the data they will get is existing content. And the more we use it, the more AI created content we will have in the information landscape. So we will basically be feeding the language models more and more of their own content. And eventually it will kind of create a uniform information landscape. While humans, we can constantly create new experiences, and we can, and probably in 10 years, we will be able to see this video and it would have aged pretty badly. But what I'm thinking right now is that, the more we as humans, we can create experiences, we can go travel, get impression from different people, and in this way we can create opinions and emotions, show our emotions, and this type of things people follow and read content from people because they can associate with it. They can they can get a nostalgic experience from the content. They can imagine how it is to be traveling in Peru and the Machu Picchu or whatever it is, and uh, AI will never will be able to fool you into that, but at the same time, you might not be able to give the same type of experience from, let's say, birth to aging as a human can do, because it's more real when we do it. But like I said, this will probably age pretty badly, and I would be proven wrong maybe in the future, and I'm aware of that.
That's the crazy thing about this technology is is exactly how fast technology advances. It scares me, and maybe it's because I'm an MIT graduate. It's just the technology goes so fast because I swear when I was in college, we were freaking out about touchscreens and how exciting it was that you could have a smartphone. And 20 years later, robots can basically talk to us.
Yeah.
Um, but the interesting part is that it's not just because the AI models use what's called RLHF, and I want to say it's like stands for reinforcement learning with human feedback. So the part that makes the AI powerful is, like you mentioned, the human feedback, like being like, is this good input? Is this good input? And I spent maybe like a couple hours training a generative AI model. And basically what you do is you like train the algorithms. It just comes up with an output and you rate it on several different realms. And um, for some reason, they didn't let me progress to you can get paid really good money doing this, supposedly. I think it was, for me, it was like $30 an hour, which is a lot just to give feedback on this algorithm. And I was looking around on the internet to see what people are doing, and like many people, they're paying for their life with this. And I just read in some newspaper article said that, that's kind of coercive because they don't have any um, money, so they're just working to train this AI. But it's really interesting the extent to which you can human feedback, like things like, is this a good, like you rate it, like did it actually answer the question? Did it say too much stuff? Um, but I think I got fired from it. I deactivated my account because I was like, I got paid like $100 just to do this test, which was pretty nice. But
Mm.
then I just was like, no. And then they're very like their terms of agreement is like very like when you're working on it, you can't talk about the details of what your work is. So I don't. they didn't accept me, so I don't know to what extent I can talk about that. But it's kind of, it's a little bit creepy, but it's also like the humans are the ones that are actually training it. And I was thinking about it because we train our own brains over our experience, but like it takes us maybe what, like several years to learn how to talk. What if we had an AI that we trained it in the same way humans did, and then just like gave it feedback for like 2 years? Like it'd probably be very good. But would it be as good as a person? Like I'm really curious about this. Like if all the AI researchers just started training for 2 years, I think they can't match it. They can't match the human brain because there's no way to, unless they had a human training it and like telling it stuff, but it has to be able to say that it doesn't know something because it can't, because the hallucinations is the part that really confused me, where it's like it'll come up with a fact and you're like, oh, this looks so real, and then you go to Google it and it's like not a real thing. But what do you think is the role of humans in this technology, and do you think it can actually match the human brain, like based on your experiences using this software, like and overcome the limitations that it has?
I think it will be able to overcome a lot of limitations, and we will see a quite steep development of or improvement of these AIs. And from my experience and from what I've seen, we are still very far away from it being able to process um, our reality the same way as human do. Um, and I think much of it is, and this is something that I notice when I've been to different types of meetings or meetups about AI and the philosophy around AI, as well as talking with content creators. And it is sometimes we we kind of forget that these AI tools do not have emotions. They are not people. They, at least as they are right now, they don't. We talk about them like they have emotions or that they have their own opinions, but in the end, they do not. They do not possess the um, uh, the property of expressing emotions, or they can express this, but they don't have their own emotions or opinions. So in the end, what they are human fed. But definitely we can feed it more and more and more data until it eventually can process information the same way a human brain can do. But then the question is if it's sustainable, considering all the resources it would take to fill these machines with the information required to not only be so generalized that it knows basically everything, that it doesn't that all the information is accurate, but also to be able to express experiences. Is quite a lot of data that needs to be processed and fed to the machine. But maybe you have a different opinion on that, and I'd be happy to discuss that. But from how I see it now, the best types of AI that I've experienced, especially from different seminars where I've been looking and where I've been attending different meetings on, for example, using AI to detect breast cancer, early stage breast cancers, or different types of diseases. These AIs are extremely specific and they do the job accurately and well because they don't require to know a bunch of other stuff, for example, about basketball or football or playing the violin or novels. It just does what it has to do, and that's why it's so accurate. As soon as you start making a general um, language model, then it becomes a little bit more demanding, and both in terms of resources that it requires and also the accuracy that it has to present. But I'd be happy to hear your opinion about it, because this is also something I cannot you cannot rely 100% on my opinion here. It's just from the experience that I've had with myself and with clients and through different discussions that I've had during meetings.
I think now there's kind of like several different camps of groups of people that are involved in this AI effort. One is obviously AI researchers, and they've always been doing AI. Another is like neuroscience researchers trying to model the human brain. I just watched a really great interview by Lex Friedman. He's like a really famous YouTuber. He has like 3 million followers. He interviewed my linguistics professor, and then he interviewed another professor at MIT named Tommaso Poggio. I don't know how to say his name. He's an Italian guy. He studies he studies vision, but he does a lot of artificial intelligence. But now it's kind of neuroscientists and computer scientists have been in conflict about AI because computer scientists don't understand how the brain works. They don't study the brain. And obviously, neuroscientists don't study neural networks, which are AI, and they're derived from the properties of the human brain, but not exactly working the same way. They're a computational model of neurons, which are the brain cells in the brain. But now, in addition to that, we have like everyone is using AI, and it's actually it's a product, and it's being used by people that have relatively low knowledge of computer science and neuroscience and stuff like that. So I think that really makes it very complicated because now AI, people don't know that much about it, but it's being used in everything. And it's kind of like it's really interesting because we're so excited about AI as a new technology, like as a as a world and as a culture. And we have this idea that like what the better best the technology is inherently good and it helps you, but there's a lot of limitations. Like we saw there's a really famous paper that has this really weird AI generated graphic, and it's a kind of like all these papers in the scientific publishing that have AI generated blurbs, and they cut and paste directly. The researchers cut and paste directly into the paper, and then you just have like these like random people aren't reading their papers before they submit them. They're just like, here's my paper. I They use generative AI, it's obvious. Then there's also the idea of like, I just saw that generative AI could be used to set prices, and that could lead to like price gouging or price manipulation here in the US. So the FTC, which is the US Federal Trade Commission, is investigating that, I guess. um, it's kind of like there's still this idea of like garbage in, garbage out, which is that ages old idea that if your data is bad, no matter how good your algorithm is, it will it will lead to crap. If your data is crap, your output will be crap. And I think a lot of people, they think that AI is like the panacea to all our world's problems, but it's really just kind of like a reflection of society. Because if you have I keep seeing all these really weird things online about AI. Like if you ask it to come up with like pictures, it'll come up with like kind of like stereotyped pictures. Or like if you ask, I forget what the prompt was. They asked AI to draw like a student. I don't remember what, and
Yeah.
it always came up with like a specific stereotype image. So it's kind of like, but we can't go back to the future, the world we had before AI, because now we're going to have to figure out how to use this. And after it's been deployed already, try to figure out what's happening with it. So I find that very personally, that makes me super uncomfortable. And I don't think it should have been like this, but
Mm.
and I
I
also can't think
wonder
of
how.
any.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I think you raise good points, and we should be very cautious about AI so that we don't let it slip through our hands. So the possibility to create. So one of the things that interests me in my project of Ivory Embassy, which is my content creation part as well, it's transparency. So um, so when it comes to science and technology, I am very um, I advocate a more transparent environment where we know what's going on, what is it that we're using, and why, what are they doing to our data, and what type of information is it that we're receiving, what are the sources. And what worries me right now is the transparency, the lack of transparency, so the opaqueness of this the current AI tools. So one thing that needs to change is to create a much more transparent AI um, ecosystem, so that we know what it is that what type of data it is that we're receiving. Now we know from pretty recent studies that different AIs, they have different biases. We know that from a study um, who plotted it. I think you know it better than I do. There is a specific political compass test, which kind of defines the political orientation of for example, AI in this case, through a quadrant where they set the economic biases on the y-axis, and then the social biases on the x-axis, and then they can see that the different types of AIs, they have a specific bias, and apparently it's significant. Some are much more left-leaning than others. And the same with transparency. We know from at least a preprint from last year that these AI tools, they lack transparency. They are super opaque. They scored very extremely low on different transparency tests, and apparently it's not. They cannot get away with it by saying that it's because of competition, because there are ways that we can get around this type of problematics for different companies, so they can still keep their competitive edge and provide transparent services to people. So that's one thing. This is something that worries me a lot with transparency. But again, this notion that we and I've seen it as well. What you mentioned before about the prompt asking the image processor to give an image of a student, and it would give a very stereotypical image of a student almost every time. And this is the type of problems that I was mentioning before, that the more we use AI, the more this type of problems will also occur, because it will learn from the content that is out there. So there's no magic there. It needs information. At least at the moment, it needs some type of information. It cannot create things from nothing. And if the information out there is actually suboptimal, we will have suboptimal results in the AI. And that's where I think that's something that speaks for, or that kind of is an advantage, is an edge to the humans who want to create content. We can create content, because much more diverse content than AI at the moment. The question is for how long we can keep it up.
There's kind of a couple of questions in my mind. One is like, now do we create content just because we have to, and like now we have an AI to do it? And then the other question is, what do we do once we just, because a lot of these things, they're like based on stereotypes, and the humans are the inputs. So the humans, I mean, they shouldn't really be surprised when the output is highly stereotyped. There was a girl that, and I'll try to find this example and link it in the description box because it was interesting to me. She said, um, provide draw me as an MIT graduate or something, or I don't know what she did. She had an MIT shirt. I don't remember if she was. They drew the stereotype was, and it was something I didn't even recognize as an MIT student. It was like a girl. It was completely not reflective of society, and it was kind of just this ideal. And I wonder if in the age of AI, especially given the fact that, social media kind of creates like aspirational, it just makes you think that people live this like magical life when like their whole life is just dedicated to creating Instagram reels, and like now you can airbrush yourself with AI. There's a bunch of filters you can use to make you look like you got fillers, and I mean for girls, for women, like you can make yourself look like you're wearing makeup and stuff. And so we're kind of like, maybe we'll be, I hope that we're not going to be like torturing ourselves about these like ideals that are generated entirely from an algorithm reflective of society's expectations. That's more like for the image generation, but maybe also for the other types of generative AI. Like I feel like we're in a new place where we can create like avatars of ourselves and create like I could create a YouTube video based on just my photo where it just like explains something and I don't know, it's like what is the point of doing that? I mean, and I think there's a million ways this could be used for good purposes, for nefarious purposes. It's already been used here in the US. There was a deep fake of Joe Biden, a campaign call that went viral, and I don't know, like what the future is for that. Like, because if you ask me, I feel that the bad applications will just far outpace the good applications because we're gonna have to figure out what the actual applications are. And then the black box issue is like really huge. Like a lot of our software, not just AI, it's so complex, has so many different parts. Like if you ask one software engineer to say like, how does this work? They wouldn't be able to tell you like the step by step of how it works. They could tell you, oh, it does this and such and such. And I wonder like um, maybe AI can help explain that, but probably not. Like I feel like there was I just attended this thesis defense, and it was a girl and she was doing she modeled some data and she used AI machine learning and then she used logistic regression. And actually, amazingly, logistic regression did a better job of predicting her data than the AI did. So I think it's like AI will do some things exceptionally well and fill in the gaps there, but I think other things it will be better to do the lo-fi thing and like the good old logistic regression, which I forget what exactly that is, but I know it's much less technical than like machine learning and automatic segmentation and labeling of data or categorized, supervised and unsupervised learning, all that good stuff. That's part of AI and machine learning. That um, maybe we'll find that we actually don't need AI for some stuff and we can go back to, hiring content writers like me, which I haven't had almost any clients, I want to say. Since I've had a few clients, very complex spaces since ChatGPT. For a while, I had none, but then they slowly started coming back. So it's like, why did we released the technology? We didn't know what it did. We thought it did a lot more than it actually did. And now we're kind of like, oh, actually, we didn't really know what Gen AI can do.
And also, we are becoming we're becoming better and better at spotting AI. I don't know about you, but many times if I read, let's say a mailer like a newsletter, on LinkedIn or posts, I can almost, I would not say all the time, but often I can spot if it is AI written, and only that kind of, if we can see it ourselves, especially if it is basic AI tools like ChatGPT, if we can see it on LinkedIn posts, then it means that it's a bit of a uniform type of writing, and I think it will be able to overcome that, and with more and more AI tools, we will see a diversity of content, of types of content. But I think that people are also realizing that is not only, writing a short prompt, asking a prompt to ask it for an abstract for the research, and that's it, and we're all happy. We can submit it to the next seminar or conference. There is a lot of things required there, a lot of expertise in writing, and I sound like I'm trying to preach that we should not be using AI and use content creators instead. I think AI can do a lot take a lot of the away a lot of the workload. So basically, what you explained before of creating an outline for your work, or you can delegate it to write smaller, a little bit more mundane information, like factual descriptions of the DNA or how many base pairs there is in the DNA. So you don't have to research everything in detail, but you can ask AI to do all this type of boring stuff like the outline as well. And then when it comes to the actual writing, the one where it requires a little bit more of a stylistic touch, then at the moment I think that we are a bit we we can give it that, the humans can give it that touch. And at the moment, the basic AI tools that we see, the ones that are for free at least, they 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 are a little bit more they lack a little bit more that human touch, especially when it comes to journalism, or a little bit more content that requires a bit more of storytelling, a little bit more of a human touch. We we can read the newspaper, and we can we see the information that the newspaper wants us to see, and we can read about it. But then many times, when you're into reading articles, you also have specific journalists that you follow. You know their name, and you follow them, and you read their content, because either they resonate with you, and or they have a style that you appreciate. They give a touch that kind of captures your attention, and that's why you follow these journalists. And if it would have been only facts that we were looking for, then that would have been one thing. Then AI could have done everything by itself right now. But since we need somehow some type of personality, which I realize we can get with AI as well. You can create your own avatar, and have your own personality. But the combination of personality, experiences, emotions, having a journalist, for example, that is able to travel to other places and experience a conflict from there, and this type of things. At least for now, we and that will take quite some time to have an AI that can keep updating from distance, and create content the way that captures niche or specific audiences.
What's the most unique application of AI that you have seen personally out there?
What did you mean with the uniqueness?
I guess I mean like innovative, like you would never thought of that being used that way.
For the content creation, I think right now I'm baffled with the eye contact AI, and how much AI can help you creating content that just even if you're completely unexperienced with, for example, video creation and writing, it can help you a lot. It can give you an edge in the writing. And then when it comes to biology and research, I think specific AIs that are extremely good, and sometimes better than physicians, to discover diseases before they actually develop, based on um, images, and looking at cell patterns, and morphologies, and being able to compare it with control samples. And this is the type of AI that we will benefit a lot from, especially in the healthcare, because it will allow us to kind of um, rescue a lot of pain and suffering and lives by just discovering things before we as humans can discover them. And this is something that we know since before. I think it was Daniel Kahneman that wrote in his book about what is it, writing slow and fast. No, thinking slow and fast. About how, I think it's there how they describe that usually this kind of statistics and data models, they are much more accurate in predicting many patterns that we humans we miss. For example, the best wine of an area, depending on weather and different data points, they can predict the quality of wines or different diseases, which we cannot do perfectly with our human mistakes and errors.
I think that the power of AI in the healthcare space is quite immense, given that especially doctors, they they spend most of their time here in the US. I don't know about different, our healthcare system is much different than other healthcare systems, as I learned taking a science policy course at Georgetown. Doctors spend a lot of their time writing notes about people, and apparently AI can now generate those notes, but apparently it hallucinates really weird things, like it makes up like really crazy things, and I can't remember the example, but it was really it was really out there. Like it said that I can't remember, but it just completely made up just like a fabricated. It was like you would never it was something that would never happen in like the real world. So, but there's also like using AI to improve patient safety because I'm involved in Patients for Patient Safety US, which is a nonprofit to improve patient safety. And it kind of came out of my work working with the Patient Safety Movement Foundation as my client. And we're planning a march for patient safety in Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill in September. And we're going to go plant flags on the Capitol Hill lawn and talk about patient safety. And apparently AI can be used there because humans' brains are limited. Like we can't process infinite information, but AI can process as many inputs as it can handle, and often many more than people, which is why I'm thinking like healthcare is one place, driving is one place where I was driving the other day and I was at a stoplight and I looked to my left and someone was on their phone, and I looked to my right and that person was on their phone too. And I was like, as a neuroscientist, I was like, cognitively, I don't think they have the cognitive capacity. Like maybe they just want to check their phone for a second. Like I understand that a stoplight, still illegal, but it's just the cognitive. I had this realization the other day that as our computers and technology get more and more complex, like I was like in my house, I was doing something very complex on my computer, and then I went outside and my brain was just like spinning because I was like, I had cognitive fatigue. But I was like, why can't they just apply that same sophistication to my car so I can drive without concentrating so much? Because
Mm.
there's a lot of, there's pedestrians, there's driving itself, there's staying in the lines, and there's some challenges for, car AI, like it doesn't respond as quickly as we do. Like I've heard of cars driving into like emergency response, like fire trucks and stuff, because they don't expect that and they don't respond quickly and all that. But I would love to have an AI powered car, like not Tesla, like beyond Tesla, like
Mm.
that actually works relatively well, because I've heard a lot of really bad horror stories about Tesla. And um, but I'd love to see a self-driving car. I'd love to see AI revolutionize healthcare. There's so much, but we have to figure out what it can really do and what it's terrible at, and not put it doing something where it's like actually bad at that. And I think that's the hard part, is figuring out what's AI bad at and approaching that with a non-biased perspective, not thinking that AI is like the panacea.
For the self-driving cars, there is a there are always layers of issues once we decide that okay, we want the comfort of a self-driving car because we want safety, but at the same time, you know, this can also expand to an international issue, a global issue, because we might see, for example, about safety. These self-driving cars, they drive based on different algorithms, and we might, as drivers, we want the car to be safe for us. So at some point, the car has to decide: do I okay? I have to either I save the driver or I save the pedestrian or the driver on or on the other side, you know, and um, and then we have quite some. We have some dilemmas there we have to deal with, and I think this is kind of reflects a lot of or AI in general. There are a lot of questions that pop up that we don't realize right now, but eventually we will have to take decisions, and not only within a nation, but also globally. Because let's say that in the US you decide that okay, we are going to require every car to, let's say, save the driver. In this type of situations, it would save the driver because it's better for business. Car 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 producers don't want to sell cars that would sacrifice the driver rather than the pedestrian, and so on and so forth. But then another country, let's say Canada, in your case, you want to cross the border with that car, but Canada will have a completely different viewpoint there. They would rather save the pedestrian and not the driver. So because they don't have that many cars in Canada, let's say, or Mexico, or but the point being that we there are a lot of issues with AI in general, and especially when it comes to safety, that we don't realize right now. But these are decisions that have to make, and I think that today we might make them locally or within our countries, but eventually we have to also be able to coordinate internationally as well, globally, and this is where I think it is crucial also that we have some type of transparency. I'm not saying to reveal all the secrets of companies if they want to keep some for a competitive edge or whatever, but at least we need some transparency, at least when it comes to their responsibilities for our information or our safety, and so we know what to expect and we know what to where the dangers lie and where it's safe to use.
Yeah, and I think
I
that's
hope
the
that makes
key.
sense.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that's the hardest piece of the puzzle is figuring out the risks and limitations where it's good, and then applying that in our laws, in our regulations, in our trade regulations. If AI is going to be used to set prices, how can we make sure that's done in a fair way and doesn't just reflect society's biases? Like, what if AI continues the racist practice of redlining just because that's in the data? Like, I think that would be like incredibly dystopian, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility here. AI is a it's emerging technology. I've noticed there's a lot of fellowships available to people here in the US to study AI, and it kind of reminds me of like I want to say like World War II when we had to do all this stuff and we just found like women got involved. Maybe it's leveling the playing field in some ways by be emergent like by being an emergent technology, and we also need that perspective of marginalized people in this discussion because they will definitely be affected if it's just internalizing society, spitting it out as an algorithm or as a
Mm.
um, result. Then I it honestly makes me really nervous to think about the future of AI, especially given that so few people truly understand both AI and its limitations and like but there's a ton of people working on this now, and there's even more every day. I see more and more AI fellowships, and everyone's using ChatGPT, and that's probably the best way to know what it can do and what it can't do is by actually trying it. I saw, just to end with some interesting note, I saw this guy on LinkedIn. He was a sociology researcher, and apparently you can model sociological interactions using ChatGPT and then like pit them against each other and like come up with a model and like test it in some kind of sociological modeling. um, so that's one thing. I don't know if it's that reflective of society. We can use it to test out sociological hypotheses. I don't think that I don't know a lot of these I see. I'm like I don't think that's really is that really possible, but we'll see. I we and in a couple of months this conversation may be completely outdated, or it may be
Yep.
the beginning of a more nuanced conversation about the regulation and implementation of AI. So who knows?
And I think we need to continue the conversation with about this type of things, even if I'm aware that much of the things that I'm saying might be outdated in, like you say, a couple of months, maybe 1, 2 years. It might be already outdated, and technology has proven me wrong with many of the things. But at least we have to highlight because we are also biased to see the negative aspects of it. We're biased to fear the unknown, and this is something that. That contributes to our survival, and we need to also discuss this type of things, all these fears, and because eventually it might also lead to improvements and kind of compromises in the development of these tools, pretty potent tools actually.
So you're in the EU. So where is AI going in the EU?
I honestly don't have an update on that. And that's maybe a bit embarrassing, but I don't have an update on the EU and its decision on AI or where it's going with it. So I cannot answer that question, unfortunately.
That's okay.
How is it in the
I
US?
Now that you've asked me that question, I basically would say the same thing because so I saw it's interesting. I keep seeing little pockets of recommendations on ways to use AI. For example, in Congress, they said internal, I feel like I saw this message among people in Congress. They said use AI for things that you don't have to say personal information, sensitive information. So like if you want to come up with a syllabus for like not a syllabus, a list of things you're going to talk about at an internal meeting. But then the next week I saw they said don't use it for that because then it's the same problem. There's also a greater need to regulate AI to figure out what's happening in AI. I feel like I saw some rules or regulations banning AI from being used in some places in the government. So it is a priority of the president to look into AI, and it's the president's advisors, PCAST, President's Council of Advisors in Science and Technology, have released a report about the use of AI, but I haven't read it. I don't have time to keep up with
Mm.
AI because I'm trying to do my own real world, real life writing. So I feel lucky because I'm like I already know how to write. I don't need AI. So AI is as far as right now AI has been irrelevant to my life. So I mean not irrelevant, but as a writer I don't need ChatGPT because I'm already a writer. So I can write things maybe not as fast as ChatGPT, but I'm happy with the output and my clients are
Yeah.
happy. So that's the question is where is it going to go from here? And I think both in the EU and the US, it's kind of a bit unknown where it's going to go from here, but it's definitely something that will have increasing attention in the next few months, years. There's no going back now that we have AI just as a
Mm.
product in the world. I can think of a lot of ways that it's really interesting and useful. Like I saw the TED Talk with Ted Gibson of MIT. He's a linguistics professor. He was my linguistics
Mm.
professor. And he
Okay.
said that LLMs are actually really interesting because they model human language better than like people can study it. So he was really happy with LLMs like as a concept, large language models.
Another renowned linguistic, Noam Chomsky, who is a bit more skeptical towards the tool and um, basically labels it as a high-tech plagiarism tool, and that's basically what it does. It plagiarizes other people's work. It's true that we as writers we're we're used to writing now, and we have that tool. We we can use it to our advantage, and but at the same time, writing is a quite lonely job, especially as if you work as a freelancer. And it can be nice to have an AI to bounce idea with, and even if it might sound a little bit sad, it happens that I sit with the AI and just bounce ideas back and forth, and maybe have some arguments with the AI because it kind of develops my thinking while I don't have anybody to have a conversation with during the times where I'm just immersed in my work and I'm not in contact with too many people. And it can be nice to kind of bounce ideas with AI, but not never, as I said before, never letting it replace your thoughts or your work.
So many more questions to talk about. We could talk about this all day probably. Thank you so much for your time,
Definitely.
Santiago.
Thanks a lot.
Any parting thoughts or just maybe we're just done?
No, it's. I think we covered quite a lot about not only generative AI, but also car AI,
Yeah.
healthcare, science, and so I think that's a good roundup to this conversation.
It was definitely a very comprehensive discussion of many different aspects of AI, but I enjoyed it
Uh,
and I think it was really valuable maybe to our listeners and viewers. So thanks again for your time.
Excellent. Thank you, Shiva.